underground cave system. This area is also remote by Chinese standards, with fewer than 1 million people spread around the county. But despite this, adventurers from all over the world come to see what is essentially China's caving mecca. From the first time the friends entered a cave known as Suboden Cave, they were hooked by all the plants and rock formations inside and the massive expanse of tunnels. It's just an extremely beautiful place to dive, on top of how much there is to explore. There are also a couple of different entry points. There's a north entrance and a south entrance that each leads to different portions of the cave, and Yuan and Tao were well acquainted with both of them. In fact, by 2014, each of them had already performed 15 dives at the cave's north entry point. Because of this, the dive plan for that day was an aggressive one, even for divers with their advanced experience. Between them, Yuan was more experienced, with more than 400 dives under his belt, but Tao still had an impressive 200 plus dives on his own. Even still, their plan for diving Suboden Cave's north entrance that day called for both of them to descend to the furthest depth they'd ever gone. Until that day, both of them had maxed out at 400 feet or 122 meters, which is already a depth that requires extreme caution. The guide rope that led from the entrance to the north entrance extended to 525 feet or 160 meters, but Yuan and Tao planned to not only reach that point, but also extend that rope another 33 feet or 10 meters. So not only would it be the deepest either of them had been at 160 feet or 49 meters, but it would also require them to leave the main guide rope for a period of time. As you might imagine, portions of any cave can look similar, and it's very easy to get turned around while away from the guide rope, especially if visibility happens to be limited. This makes it extremely critical in cave diving, and is essential to help divers maintain a sense of direction and space. To prepare for their record dive, the plan the two put together was meticulous and something they worked on for months. They did the math over and over again to ensure they had the right amount of breathing gas, as well as the right mixtures. This is because diving as deep as they planned has to be planned out perfectly. Most of the air we breathe at sea level is made up of nitrogen and is safe to breathe underwater to a depth of about 100 feet. As you go deeper, the pressure causes the nitrogen to enter the bloodstream faster than soft tissues can absorb it, and the excess gas creates a narcotic.
Tora hat reserviert, hat er gesagt.
Obviously, that's not ideal in a dangerous environment, so to stem this impact, divers breathe gas mixtures that are made up of a smaller percentage of nitrogen. However, for any dive deeper than 217 feet or 66 meters, oxygen begins to become toxic as well. This is where divers begin to add helium to the mixture instead of more oxygen. All of this is to say that for a dive as deep as the one the two planned, usually divers have to switch to tanks with different mixtures to avoid falling victim to these conditions as they get progressively deeper. Now, just 1 month before the dive at Suboden North, the world-renowned French cave diver Pascal Bernabé was the one to extend the guide rope to the 525-foot mark. At the time of this dive, Pascal already claimed to have broken the record for the deepest dive using a self-contained breathing apparatus. His claimed mark of 1,080 feet or 330 meters was deeper than the previous record, but unfortunately wasn't officially recognized due to what record keepers believed was a lack of evidence. Either way though, even if he didn't hold the official record, Pascal was still clearly reaching depths that only a few divers have ever reached.
Und da! Was aber jetzt? Wo sind wir? Wir reisen durch die Zeit und entdecken magische Orte.
Wir treffen fantastische Tiere.
Ah, ein Wal! Ein Oktopus! Lust auf eine Schlittenfahrt? Spaßige Mania ist wieder da, mit 4 entzückenden Plüschtieren. Kommt mit, gemeinsam erforschen wir die Abenteuer des hohen Nordens.
Seeing this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to learn from one of the sport's best, Yuan traveled to meet up with Pascal, who was more than happy to help figure out a decompression plan. As the two spoke, Pascal would end up telling Yuan that not only would he have to factor gas mixtures to prevent nitrogen narcosis and oxygen toxicity, but he'd also have to plan for the threat of a condition called high-pressure liver syndrome, or HPNS. This is a condition that generally occurs deeper than 500 feet, but these are relatively rare, so it's a condition that's rarely encountered. Essentially, HPNS is caused by the effects of breathing too much helium that deep. Complicating things further is that helium is used in progressively higher concentrations to prevent nitrogen narcosis and oxygen toxicity. This means that even the simplest math error can lead to tremors, involuntary shaking, drowsiness, and even changes in heart rate and rhythm, among others. After the two had planned everything out, and after being satisfied that he had the very best advice he could possibly receive, Yuan planned a practice dive for himself and Tao in the Philippines that would take them close to 500 feet in open water. This would give them a chance to experience what things were like deeper than 400 feet and gain an understanding of the effect it might have on them. Unfortunately, as the date approached, because of Tao's work schedule, he couldn't go on the practice dive. So Yuan then went alone and performed the dive just days before their planned date in Judon. This ended up going smoothly, so he hurried back to China to finalize the dive plan and make the last few preparations. On April 17th, so the day before their dive, Yuan, Tao, and their support diver, Zhou Pei, arrived at the cave to stage more than 20 gas cylinders with various mixtures at appropriate depths. When that was complete, they all went over the dive for a final time. Their time from the surface of their target depth was estimated at 20 minutes. When they reached 566 feet or 170 meters, they'd only be able to stay for a few minutes before starting to make their ascent. This is because even a minute that deep can equate to hours of additional decompression on the material surface. In preparation for this, the estimate Yuan and Pascal came up with was 3 hours and 50 minutes worth of decompression to perform this ascent. All of their gas volumes and average this exact time in mind, so if they set it to a minute or two longer than that at their target depth, this could throw off their calculations entirely. In addition to finalizing the precise time as they staged the cylinders on April 17th, they also set visibility inside Suboden would greatly reduce their continuous rain and falling days before the dive. During the winter months, visibility upwards of 50 feet or 15 feet, but it seems that our diving experts that have just booked 6.5 feet or 2 meters or so ahead of them. However, the three divers assessed the situation and determined that it was still safe to perform the dive. After all, they were very familiar with the cave and the positions of the guide rope. Additionally, the passages of Judon North weren't particularly tight at any point, so none of them were overly concerned about the danger of opening dreaded. Finally, the following day, everything was ready and the two friends stood at the edge of the entrance, ready to perform an aggressive breakfast dive. Outside Judon North, A would remain ready near the surface in case Yuan and Tao needed assistance to the dive. The two best friends then did one final quick check before signaling to each other they were ready to skip into the water. As we discussed before, Yuan would be responsible for keeping them on the dive, while Tao's duty was to fix arrows to the rope that would point in the direction of the cave's entrance. Should they lose their sense of direction for any reason, the rope and the arrows would ensure they'd be headed towards safety. Several minutes later, at 393 feet, the pair arrived about the deepest they'd ever been, and they took a moment to stop and check in with one another. Yuan then gave Tao the okay signal in his hand, as if asking if he was ready to descend further. Tao then gave the signal back, and the two continued on. Throughout the dive to that point, they each switched to the proper gas filters at the proper depths, but then when they reached 538 feet, Yuan began to feel his consciousness starting to slip away. This didn't make any sense to him, because he had been so careful with his gas measures, but it was clear they needed to start their ascent to reverse the he was feeling. At this point, they were about 13 feet past the guide rope, but they were in conditions that only allowed them to see about half that distance. Yuan then led them back to where the existing guide rope should have been, using the extension of the rope he was hanging onto, when something completely knocked the wind out of him. The guide rope was gone. Even worse, still feeling the effects of death, Yuan looked at him and instantly knew they were in trouble. They then continued on, feeling along the side of the rope and finally come off the guide rope. And somehow, miraculously, they At this point, they definitely needed to make it back to the next tank, and those were still a good 150 feet up. Even still, Yuan believed they could make it there before the rest of his air ran out, until he looked down and saw Tao was stuck under a rock. The low visibility had caused him to accidentally swim beneath a slight obstruction. Yuan then rushed in to free him, and when he got there, Tao wasn't struggling to free himself. He was instead pointing his light at his neck, signaling he was quickly running out of air too. Yuan then immediately pulled his reserve respirator line from his tank and put it in Tao's mouth. After he had air, Yuan managed to free him from the obstruction, and the two continued onto the surface, trying to contain their increasing rate. Doing a quick calculation in his head, he figured that they had just 3 or 4 minutes at most before the system would be empty. This was then made worse by the fact that Tao was now extremely fatigued, and you wanted to actually pull him with his right arm while keeping his left arm on the guide rope. By then, they were less than 300 feet from the surface, and Yuan checked his gauge and found that they only had enough gas for one diver to make it another 130 feet. Luckily, by then, they had only another 50 feet to go to the next set of cylinders. But before they were able to continue, Tao just floated up right past Yuan toward the surface and just disappeared into the low visibility water. Yuan immediately knew that Tao was unconscious because of the way he didn't try to grab him as he floated by. He then quickly ascended the rope after him, but he couldn't see Tao anywhere. Worse yet, he didn't have nearly enough gas to leave the guide rope, locate Tao, and then get them both back to the rope. He desperately shined his light in every direction to try to locate his best friend, but as he did, his eyes also began to get heavy. He tried to shake it off, but he knew that his life depended on getting to the next tanks, which were at the 246-foot mark. Then, horrifyingly, after a few more breaths, he started to feel resistance from the tank on his inhales, indicating he was dangerously close to running out of air completely. So, with just enough to spare, he swam to the 6 tanks and switched to his decompression mixture for that level. For a moment, he was able to breathe a sigh of relief and turn his focus back to finding Tao, with immediately returning the pain in his stomach he was feeling moments before. He then descended along the guide rope to a section of cave that was nearly vertical, which he was also familiar with, yet at that moment he felt like he was there for the first time. By then, he knew all hope was lost. He then tried to abide by the necessary decompression stops on the way, but he was too confident, and the weight of each level was too big. In the end, he decided to rapidly sink to where Pei was waiting support. Just below the surface, Pei watched as a light suddenly appeared out of nowhere, just a few feet further. It was Yuan, but there was no sign of Tao. Finally, after Yuan services had begun to arrive, so he was immediately carried out of the water and directly into an ambulance. Pei then assisted rescue divers, who were also showing up after the alarm had been raised, but because they needed to plan for gas and volume mixtures, the effort was delayed until the next day. There was now no doubt that Tao was dead. On the morning of April 19th, the first group of divers entered Judon North Space Academy, locating his lifeless body at 167 feet, and an hour later he was back on land. Meanwhile, Yuan spent several days inside the decompression chamber and made a full recovery. His time in the chamber gave him a lot of time to think about the accident and what might have happened. Before he was done, Yuan made a full list of errors and oversights that contributed to
Egal was du brauchst, finde den besten Preis auf Idealo.
In the end, he believed their greatest error was overconfidence, and everything trickled down from there. Before they even got to the day to dive, the plan they had painstakingly come up with was flawed, and this all started with targeting a depth that was significantly greater than anything they had done before. Beyond their previous max depth of 400 feet, every single foot matters and makes a difference in the dangers that must be avoided. And while they were breeding the correct mixture for various depths they encountered, pressure can affect everyone differently. And even beyond that, appropriate mixtures also don't eliminate the potential for many conditions that can impair divers that far down. Divers